Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Home Podcast. Back here for the first time in this calendar year in the month of March, a month that obviously gives us the NCAA basketball tournament, a real favorite event of ours here at this podcast. One we will eventually see the Cougars participate in as a very highly seeded participant of on the men's side. But March also means we're getting closer or have just arrived at, in some sports cases, for Big 12 seasons, for a number of sports we're talking about on the show, including some we'll talk about here tonight. We also have a couple of very recent conference championship events that wrapped up, which we will discuss tonight as well. Bobby, you have been back very recently. I think you still are in my hometown, a city that is not your hometown by no one, is incredibly near and dear to your heart, the city of Houston, Texas. You were actually at the Fertitta Center for senior night against KU. You caught some baseball at Schrader Park as well. Bobby, how has your trip to the Bayou City been, and how's life generally been, amigo?
Buddy, fantastic. I am, like you said, in the Bayou City. I am doing, I did Kansas on Monday. Last night I did baseball, went and played some golf today. Tomorrow I'm playing more golf, and I'm actually going to visit with Coach Las Maria.
Nice.
So that'll be pretty cool. And then
you mentioned that before, but I was like, I'm not sure if that happened today or didn't.
Yeah, no, it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. And then Saturday I will be doing Cougar basketball in Waco. So
yeah, go
see the parents and knock that out of the park. So
I'm sure go do your annual see all the houses from what's the, I'm not trying to be
Fixer Upper.
I was trying to say, I couldn't remember if it was the Flipper or the Fixer Upper. I promise Fixer Upper was in the first three guests. You're gonna like, really quick aside.
They do tours.
Oh yeah, I know. Like, again, I know I was like, Bobby's thinking like, this guy was complaining to me on text message about like taking too long. He's about to tell like a wake up. But really quick, I have another friend. I think I mentioned has worked for Baylor as a Baylor alumnus for a long time. Got Dustin and I really nice seats in 2014 for their regular season game against Iowa State at the Farrell Center, just out of the blue, which we were pretty stoked about. Jason, since I'm call back first, there's zero chance that Jason is listening, but shout out to Jason. Anyway, at a dinner at that dinner with Dustin and I in Waco, he's just like, oh yeah, like, people come from as far as China to see House with.
Oh yeah.
Upper. And now like, okay, like, I can process that fact now. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty popular. Like Waco's growing a lot, et cetera, et cetera. In 2014. Yeah. You could have picked my jaw before. Like, people come from fucking China to see Fixer Upper houses. It
Dude,
blew my
it's
mind.
like the number 3 highest visited like tourist attraction in America. It's ridiculous.
Waco, Texas.
The silos.
I'm sure you're as someone who lived there, decent
yes.
of your life. I'm sure you're as your gas is as flat as me. But to steer us back after I steered us off the road. Going to mention really quickly a little bit of housekeeping at the top. If you want to support our show and you do not do so already, patreon.com/shpodcast. You're going to get bonus episodes. And I think most importantly, and the main thing that we've sold this as over the years, we've many patrons that have been with us many years, is that you're just defraying the time and effort costs that goes into that. Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis, doing an independent Houston Cougar sports podcast. Of course, please also support our friends at the 1012 Network, TEN 12 Network, on the socials, wherever you do social media. Just made the case for Kelvin Sampson for National Coach of the Year on their most recent podcast for the work he's doing with Cougar men's basketball this season. If that sounds good to you, if generally good Big 12 talk sounds good to you, please listen to the 1012 podcast and follow the 1012 Network wherever you do social media. Got to kick things off with your now, as we kind of expected as of last episode, undisputed solo Big 12 men's basketball champions, the Houston Cougar men's basketball program, which won 2 games and will play a regular season finale in the week to come. That'll be our starter here. In your win on Saturday, a 73-64 win over Cincy was kind of a reminder, if we needed it. I don't think that we did, but we certainly got it in this one, that even on the days where the Cougs start really cold offensively, that this is still a rugged enough team defensively to more than make up for it. Cincy never really let this game become a laugher, but that fits kind of with the current year's Cougar team MO. Your analogy from a few episodes back, Bobby, about this not being a knockout punch fighter kind of team. And I think the MO of recent years, Cincy games, but also a final margin that probably flattered Cincy a little bit for how uncompetitive this was for most of the second half after the first few minutes, after the Bearcats briefly cut the lead to, I think, 7 in the early minutes of the second half. Bobby, what are your first thoughts about Saturday's solo title clinching win over the Cincinnati Bearcats?
Kind of started out a little rough for the Cougs. Couldn't shoot the ball very well. Went down 10-2, but then, one of my favorite things to look at when I'm looking at like the ESPN page of this is always to look at the game flow, and you just slowly see that U of H ticking up, and there are lots of flat spots for Cincinnati. I thought a pretty good defensive performance for the Cougs. You see 44.1% field goal percentage. That doesn't get you super excited, but the Cougs, in not to play a little bit of a spoiler alert here, and to get ahead, did the opposite of how they played on Monday and were able to shoot the ball really well, 53.6% from field goal percentage and 21.4% from 3. Probably pretty low there, but you were out rebounded. You were helped by not having as many turnovers, but LJ Cryer, 20 points. Yeah, just a solid performance all around from this team. Kind of what you expect from a team kind of trying to get a little healthy and get their groove before March.
Fully agreed there. I wanted to give a quick shout out to the Tropical Isle Bayou Club on Bourbon and Toulouse, which had a TV on CBS, which allowed me to watch, I would say, about 2/3 of this game live during my Mardi Gras adventure in New Orleans this past weekend. I've obviously since rewatched this game in full in my home base back here in Vegas. Really good game from LJ Cryer, and not a unique occurrence for LJ Cryer to be leading the way for you offensively, but he did it in a somewhat unique way for LJ Cryer. You kind of, like, great 3-point shooter. You kind of expect that to be what he's doing more often than not. Offensively, a lot of his offense came close to the basket than we might normally be used to. I just wanted to highlight one specific play because it's beautiful highlight reel play. Just a perfect backdoor cut by LJ Cryer, perfect pass by JoJo Tugler. Had to go look at the game play by play to see exactly where it was to memorialize this correctly. It was the 3:26 mark in the first half. Uncommonly good pass from Tugler, who ended up leading the Cougars in assists on Saturday. A reminder of how good he is going to be beyond the stuff he does really well right now, the shot blocking, the rebounding. You see the building blocks of, like, oh man, like if this guy stays 2 more years in college or even another year in college, like he's going to be good at things that we don't really think of as JoJo Tugler's strengths now.
Very Jawan Roberts-esque.
Bingo. Yeah. What we were seeing 3 or 4 years ago from him. And a great finish by Cryer. I don't want to undersell LJ Cryer's role. Perfect backdoor cut. Perfect finish from a guy who we more think of as a perimeter offensive guy, but can score in a lot of different ways. It is truly, you and I specifically a lot last season were kind of just like, okay, well, when's the LJ Cryer from Baylor that we expected the scoring pedigree to break out? I don't think you look at this conference season, Bobby, and not that he had some down games in there, and it's a reminder of how good this team is that he had down games, and you didn't really notice in the overall result because Miles Uzan or Lonnie Roberts or somebody else like stepped up in there. But he's been the whole package for you as a scorer, as a guy who affects winning in so many different ways this season. This game was just another reminder that we did not need, but certainly got there. Was also a game where your bench group, I really think, did the most work getting you out of that early hole, really changing the energy, and no guy more important there than Malik Wilson. Yep. Another Malik performance that if you didn't watch the game, if you just kind of looked at the box score, caught the highlights, you wouldn't see 8 points and 2 steals off the bench and I'd think, solid game from Malik, but I think that undersells how important he was to you getting this game going in the right direction. Not for the first time this season, he was your tone setter in a way that allowed that really bad early start offensively to not become anything that was worth worrying about outside the first handful of minutes of this game. I would say probably Terrence Arsenault's best performance since the road win at Colorado as well. I think he was an underrated part of the Arizona win, but a reminder of how good he could be as well. And this whole game for me, if I could zoom out for a bit, Bobby, it was a reminder that guys like Javier Francis, Terrence Arsenault, Malik Wilson are good enough to start for most other college basketball programs. That's something that differentiates this U of H team from some really, really good ones that I'm not sure is deep. Really, the only comparison I could think of, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, if you watch a lot of Cougar basketball like me, the only team that I think could compare there was the 21-22 team, and we never got to really see that depth in practice because you lost Marcus Sasser by Christmas to injury. Tremont Mark was never really healthy and got shut down from that season early, but ended up still being a very good team because you had guys like Kyler Edwards, Josh Carlton, Tajay Moore, and of course, sophomore year, Jamal Shed. But I think that it's the depth. It's the fact that, those three guys, okay, well, you have an 8-man rotation. Doesn't sound great, but I think you have like an 8-man rotation where 8 guys could be starting caliber for a lot of the country, and that's really cool.
Yeah, if you're going to have an 8-man rotation, this is a pretty good 8-man rotation to have. You'd love to see it at 9 or 10, but,
Oh, yeah.
Coach Sampson hasn't really played much of a 9-10 guy rotation in any of his time here. He usually likes to settle in at about 8, get an extra big man in there, and then have a couple of guards who can come in and out of the game whenever they need to. So overall, pretty the 8-man rotation isn't too big of a concern for me.
No. And I think we both agree it would probably be 9 if Ramon Walker was healthy. Would he be playing exactly as much as Malik? But he's probably out there if you're healthy. But
yeah,
also he's probably I would say, no respect to Ramon, he's probably your 4th guy off the bench if he is healthy at this point. Playing more than like Mercy Miller said Lott, but yeah, no, I think
right.
Really luxury. I'm gonna also compliment the officials on Saturday for not ejecting Cincy's Dan Skillings on a play where his foot grazed or hit or whatever you want to call it, Emmanuel Sharp in the head. A little clumsy. Obviously wasn't intentional or inexcusably reckless. Flagrant one was the right call there. And I don't think if the shoe was in the other foot and it was like, I don't know, JoJo Tugler there, that I would have been too upset if he had gotten a flagrant one. Right. And the TV commentator said this too. That should have been how JT Toppin's situation was handled in the first Tech game. I think we might win that game, honestly, if we do. I know that sounds crazy because that was their head coach and their best player getting subtracted there. But when we talked about the Tech game, I thought that gave them an extra amount of juice that allowed them to pull off that road upset.
Yeah,
and so I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad they didn't eject Dan Skillings for something that didn't deserve ejection. I talk more bad than good about college basketball officials because I think a lot of college basketball officials deserve that treatment, but thought they handled that pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
12th straight head-to-head win against Cincinnati, which is crazy given how...
I remember when those games were toss-ups.
Well, also, when we could barely beat them.
Yep.
That was one of those programs when we entered the AAC, and it became clear, who I was like, oh man, I'm happy moving to a better league than Conference USA. I'm happy moving anywhere but Conference USA, but how are we going to be competitive with Cincy and UConn? And funny enough, UConn ended up not being a problem, and Cincy only did for the first handful of years before you fired James Dickey and Kelvin Sampson got going. But I don't think I would have ever, if you had told me, okay, U of H is going to get a lot better at men's basketball, I still wouldn't have predicted a future where we win 12 in a row in this series.
Right. Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, it was, I think it was 32-5 or something like that as recently as the 3rd or 4th season of this podcast. That's how much that head has changed. We also had a 65-59 win over the Kansas Jayhawks. Bobby, if you were done with your Cincinnati Bearcats thoughts.
I am all done, buddy.
And a 65-59 win, not a repeat of that absolute demolition of the Jayhawks from last season's home regular season finale, but also not a game that anyone could watch and come to any other conclusion than the Cougars were the better of these two teams. Final home game for a number of our absolute favorite Cougar men's basketball players. Bobby, you were there in person. Like me, you kind of procrastinated getting down to Houston for a game this year, but dang it, we both did it. We both made it. You made it out there for a big senior night. How was that experience, and just what are your big takeaways from this latest win over the Jayhawks?
I think the experience, I'll kind of talk on that first. The experience is awesome, man. I texted you this. I'm sitting there, and there are Kansas fans. I'm kind of surrounded by Kansas fans. And to hear them say, oh man, we can't let their crowd get into it. This place is loud. It's like, us? I got there a little early because I was thinking that they were going to open the door. Most sporting events open the doors 2 hours or maybe an hour and a half, 90 minutes before tip. Fertitta only does 60 minutes, and I thought that was really weird because it was senior night too. So, you're promoting to be there early, and, it starts at 7:30, and then you're going to open the doors 30 minutes before that. That feels a little off, but, no not going to nitpick that, but I'm sitting outside for like 10 minutes and there is a line of students down the stairs wrapping around and it goes down. And I was like, I remember when I used to be able to just walk up 3 minutes before tip and show my ID. And it was it was easy
you
to
only
get
got
in.
that crowd from Memphis or like when we got
Kentucky
randomly. Yeah.
Yep. And Dustin and I actually talked about that, how that was the big game every year. And I remember me and shout out Sean Randall, who was director of marketing for U of H athletics for a while when we were in college, and we had a great working relationship with him. But
Great dude.
Him and I had this thing that we called Project 849 because there were 849 student seats in the arena and we wanted to fill them up just one time. And Dustin and I went and did a whole walking tour, which you now know as a roaming pep rally at U of H. And, it kind of caught on, but we filled it up that night. And I'll never forget Sean coming up to me like, dude, I never thought this was possible. We did it. And like, we're celebrating, we're hugging, we're celebrating that night. The student section just happened to be full. And now you kind of, there's students lining up for a game. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. So, the experience is just awesome. And Fertitta, there's not a bad seat in the place.
U of H has made lots of bad decisions over the years, which we've talked about the show. Such an insanely good decision to be like, we want this thing to be a hot ticket. We want it to be an intimate venue and create something at that great of experience. Sorry,
yeah,
didn't mean to cut in on you there.
No. The only thing that I would change about Fertitta is that fan shop. It is about 20 square feet. Like 6 people can fit in it comfortably. And but that's just a very U of H thing to do, is to get this wonderful, beautiful arena and then forget to do the fan shop and collect money from their fans. Like there's nothing U of H does better than not getting money from the fans. They make it so hard to support this team. It's insane. I don't understand it, but that's neither here nor there. Experience was great. Thoughts from the Kansas game. Samson kind of said this in his interview with SVP. We finally won ugly. It was an ugly game. You look at the shooting percentages. Let me pull it up here. Let me get over to the right tab. You shoot 35% from the field, 35% from 3, but you win how U of H has always won under Kelvin Sampson. You forced 14 more turnovers. You out-rebound them by 3, but you had more offensive rebounds than they did. Just overall, one of those great games. I think I texted you this as well. I have never... just to go back. You out-rebound on the offensive glass by 12. You have 17. Kansas has 5. Defensive rebounds, they got you 29-20, but that means you put up a ton of shots if you have 46 rebounds on your ledger there. So you weren't making shots, but you were getting the boards. And I texted you this, and this was kind of a thought that I put out there. Has anyone ever made a double-double look as ugly as Hunter Dickinson manages to do? Like, that was
He's such a stat piler, man. Like, and I don't typically, it's just one of those, like, oh, he averages this and this. Then you watch the actual product, and he's got a good shooting range for a big man. He's got some skill, but like, there's no dog in the guy. Like I said last episode,
he had
talked about Kansas.
He goes, you look at it, he goes 17, 12, amazing. 2 blocks, 3 assists. You're like, okay. 7 turnovers, 5 personal fouls. What? And I would venture to say he probably had more than 7 turnovers.
Yeah.
Some where he dishes a pass and it bounces off some hands or something and it goes off the other guy. He was awful. I remember I had a guy in the concession stand at halftime. It was right as the second half started, and I think Hunter got a foul. And the guy looks at me, he's a Kansas fan, and he goes, "I'm just hoping our big white guy fouls out." And I was like, that guy was supposed to be like AP Player of the Year, and now Kansas fans are like begging him to foul out.
And like, fans can be unreasonable, but like, he genuinely has been such a minus for them, like, over a good chunk of this Big 12 season.
Yeah. So that was kind of my big thought, is I was yelling at Hunter Dickinson even though he couldn't hear me. I was too far away. But, every time he would do something, I would just be like, "Great job, Hunter." And I felt like I did that more. And then one time I like looked up and he's got 17 and 10. I was like, when? When did he get that? So those were kind of some of my, more concrete thoughts on the game.
Very much shared that when I looked at the box. Like when you said that, I would have at the time, because I don't usually look at the box during a game unless I guess we were shooting pretty poorly. So I think I probably looked at it in the first half, but hadn't looked at it once like the game I got close to or at final. And you said that, and I just was like, I know Bobby isn't telling me the wrong numbers here, but it feels more like a 9-6 performance.
Yes, it was amazing. It was so bad. Like,
and you know what I'll mean by this when I say this? It was a classic Houston Cougar men's basketball game.
yes,
Not it's lower. We'll call it lowercase c classic, not like classic in the we beat
this is one of the top 5 greatest games of all time.
No, this is how this program. If you're a younger, and I assume our listening audience runs the game at years, and if you didn't, there's no gatekeeping here. If you didn't become a fan in 2015 or when Bobby and I did back in the Stone Ages, like it's fine, it's cool. We all jump on this in different times.
Boy, I bet some people when you heard Stone Ages in 2007 are flipping.
I didn't say no. I didn't say 2007, and then when and now you've made all those people very mad at me. So we all jump into this at different times. This is how Houston Cougar men's basketball. This was kind of the general like not that you didn't have we had good offensive players 7-8 years ago. Like I love Rob Gray and Corey Davis and Galen Robbins. Like those will always be among my favorite Cougar men's basketball players. No matter how many amazing teams we have after this season. But this is how we used to win games. Like in spite of the shooting sometimes, with great offensive rebounding, with tough defense. With you, as I saw one commentator, I believe it says the Cougars were playing like they had rakes on their hand defensively. The amount of balls they were getting their hands on, like an exceptional rebounding and defensive performance. This year's team has more often done it with a bit more offensive style and shot making than some of those previous years' teams. But you and I, we could appreciate this kind of Cougar win. And a lot of that rebounding came from places you might not have expected it to. Now, we expect everybody who goes on the floor for Kelvin Sampson to rebound well, but I really like seeing Emmanuel Sharp, who did not have an amazing shooting night, grab 5 offensive boards. It never gets old to me that guys like Sharp and LJ Cryer, even as your go-to guards and leading scorers, those guys are so willing to do the dirty work or the non-scoring things that contribute to winning Cougar men's basketball. There was, back in that game last episode at Tech, I think I highlighted a play where LJ Cryer won a 50-50 ball to get a second crack at the basket in a possession where Sharp ultimately hit a 3. And I think Sharp, what he showed in this game, plus his ridiculous consistency at the free throw line, it's why even as he's still kind of working to get his shot back after that injury layoff, he has to be getting a lot of minutes. He's still a player who affects winning for you, even if he's not as consistently hitting shots from beyond the arc. We'll also shout out JoJo Tugler and Malik Wilson, maybe guys who were a little less surprised to see carrying the load rebounding wise. JoJo had 8, Malik had 6 rebounds. And worth zooming in even further on what an incredible defensive effort Monday night against the Jayhawks was. The Cougs forced 20 Kansas turnovers, the second most by the Jayhawks in a game this season, most by a Big 12 opponent. Mizzou forced 22 in their win over KU. KU's turnover percentage Monday night was 30.9%. Bobby, nearly 1/3 of this game's possessions, U of H and Kansas, ended in the Jayhawks turning over the ball. That is crazy. It checks out with what we watched, but it's still crazy to think about. The Cougars' 16 steals were the most by a KU opponent this season. 5 of your 8 players who logged minutes Monday night had multiple steals. Roberts and Wilson each had 4. Unsurprisingly, Miles Uzan was just behind them with 3. JoJo and Emmanuel Sharp each had 2. And Sampson's been pretty consistent over the years also at starting his seniors on senior night. You had Ryan Elvin, walk-on program legend, start last year's KU regular season finale. I thought that was really cool. Like, it was, at the time, I know U of H did clinch the solo, like K-State did beat Iowa State that season right before tip-off, so you had clinched it regardless of the result, but that I thought really cool. Like, Kelvin still had Ryan Elvin go out senior year. I know it's a year ago, but still worth mentioning. But Malik Wilson, it was really cool to see him. That was my point, to take the bull by the horns and do as well as he did with his start.
And what I was going to say is, did Malik Wilson have our candidate, one of our basketball candidates this year, for play of the year with that reverse layup?
I think it's gotta be. It's gotta be in the list. Yeah,
incredible. It was a clutch moment. You needed a bucket there, and that reverse layup was spectacular. And then, Sam, I don't know if you went through pictures because I was going through pictures looking for my latest conspiracy theory that like a handful of our players have a different font on their numbers. It's not a major deal. It just was bothering me in the arena because it looked like it to me. But anyways, I was going through the pictures. Have you seen the picture of LJ Cryer like walking off after a 3 and Bill Self has his hands in his face? Or
No,
his
I
face
haven't,
in
I
his
haven't seen
hands?
that one yet.
Oh my god.
I need to find that.
I'll find it and send it to you, but it is,
Appreciate you.
I mean, I saw it and I was crying laughing. Like it could not have been a better picture to describe where these two programs are.
Yeah. I remember when Malik came in this program before the 22-23 season. He ended up missing that entire year.
Mm-hmm.
He was hurt. And in the offseason, I believe he at least preliminarily said he was entering the portal. I don't know if he ever put his name in during the offseason. And I remember Dustin and I at the time were just like, yeah, makes sense. Didn't play here. Hard to see his path to playing a lot on the coming season's roster. And then he ends up being, I think last season, a solid defense toughness guy off the bench. Definitely overachieving what we thought he'd be just because he actually ended up being a consistent rotation guy for you. And this season, he's once again just, I think, well outperformed what you or I haven't gone back and listened to our season preview. We weren't talking bad about the guy, but neither of us predicted the kind of season that he ended up having.
No. Yeah.
I don't know if any guy on this team, maybe Uzan, has overachieved. There was a rotation guy or stars overachieved what you and I thought they'd be this year more than Malik.
Absolutely. You know me, I went from a guy who had who I don't want to say was anti-Malik because I do like Malik a lot. I did not think he was doing a lot to justify his minutes, and now he absolutely is.
Yeah, since that December winter break, he's become one of the best bench guys that this program's had under Kelvin Sampson.
It's insane.
And this season wasn't just that iconic shot against Kansas at Fog Allen in January. You can go to a number of games in Big 12 play this year where Malik Wilson and his play were a big part of the Cougs being able to eventually win the basketball game. He's going to get remembered more for that big shot at Kansas, but if he doesn't play very well early in that game when very little else is going right for you, I don't think I'm going too far in saying that Kansas might have buried U of H in too big of a hole for them to dig out of in that game. Yep. Malik Sweat kept your head above water there. I would say the same for the UCF game at UCF. This team's going to really miss LJ Cryer, J1 Roberts, and Javier Francis once their college careers are done, hopefully here in just over a month's time after cutting down some nets. But Wilson's toughness, his ability to really rise to the moment when maybe everything around him isn't having its best game. Like we talked about the Cincy game a little bit ago. Like he was a big part of you getting back in that game. He was a big part of you taking control of this game. He might not be the name that comes to the people's lips as much as LJ Cryer or J1 Roberts here in a couple of years, but he's been so valuable to this year's team. He's going to be really sorely missed around these parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shout out to my co-host here for this little stat. If we have nothing else here before we get to the Baylor game, one more Kansas thing for the road. Again, shout out to you here. Houston Cougar men's basketball, as of recording tonight here on Wednesday, March 5th, has almost as many Big 12 conference wins, 18, as Kansas has wins for the entirety of its season. The Jayhawks have 19. It's pretty cool.
It's awesome.
And we have one game from the week to come, Saturday evening, emphasis on evening. We'll have our regular season finale. The Cougars will travel to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears at Foster Pavilion for the second time, a 9 p.m. Central tip-off, which I think is the latest I've seen a Central time zone-based game start for the Cougars. Obviously, you're going to get late tips from time to time for games that happen further west, but I'm sure it has to be scheduling hell, whoever's figuring out this last regular season / smaller conference tournament program. Figuring all that together at ESPN, I'm sure is difficult, but 9 p.m. start. Like that is kind of rough. And for the second time, we're, seeing this team this season, and I would say a Baylor team that hasn't done anything to lock up what looks like probably a couple months ago, an airtight NCAA tournament case. I think right now, I'm pretty certain Baylor's name will be called when they announce the bracket on Selection Sunday. But when this team was picked number 8 in the country in the preseason and is picked one of the top teams in the Big 12 in the preseason, I don't think many Baylor fans would have been happy if they learned in 4 months' time that they'd be fighting for a 9 or 10 seed and still appearing in every publication's bubble watch. Like that's probably not what the full. I mean, you're a little
No.
closer to the pulse of the Baylor fan base, not saying than I am. Can't imagine they're too thrilled about this season's results. There's some external factors. There have been injuries, but can't
Yeah,
imagine they're too happy about that.
I haven't followed it too much. I haven't followed them too much. It is pretty crazy though to think the number 30 Ken Palm team is on the bubble.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say on the bubble. I would say in the bubble discussion.
Yeah.
I think they would have to really, which I hope happens. I think there'd have to be bid stealers. There'd be, I think, some unlikely scenarios. There's a reason on Bracket Matrix. I think I was this morning. Everyone who contributes to Bracket Matrix or who they look at had him in the field. I think they'll be in the field, but
yeah.
I wouldn't have expected in November. I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know if Baylor's gonna make the tournament. I think they'll make the tournament. Like I mean, you could put a large percentage of that on the fact they've had rotten luck with guys staying healthy. One of their veteran guards, Langston Love, who was incredible shooting the last time these teams faced off. He missed a chunk of the season hurt. Should be starting on Saturday night. Immediately before the last game between these teams, Baylor big man Josh Ojianwuna, an every game starter. He went down with a season-ending injury in their game against UCF. That really changed how Baylor's had to line up. They've had to basically go with a 4-guard lineup. 6'7" Norchad Omar playing a little bit out of position as the center. But they also have some good old-fashioned misses in how they built this roster. Jeremy Roach, coming in from Duke, was one of the most hyped off-season additions for any Big 12 program. Hasn't proven himself to be a difference maker like you would expect from a guy consistently listed as one of the bigger transfers this offseason. Ditto for Jalen Celestine, who wasn't as hyped as Roach, but I would say it's been pretty disappointing in the season with the Bears. And for those who aren't delighting in Baylor's failure, definitely not the two of us. We're definitely in the delighter category there. It's kind of a bummer that VJ Edgecombe is having this unbelievable freshman season. He's a really fun player to watch. Well, if he wasn't wearing a Baylor jersey, I would say he'd be one of my top 5 favorite non-U of H players this season, cementing he's going to be a very high pick in this summer's NBA draft. And I would say Norchad Omar, coming in from Miami, doing basically what they probably hoped for him to do, and to have Baylor never contend for the Big 12 and really not play for most of the last couple of months like one of the country's best 25 teams. That's
Oh man.
I don't it's a real shame,
Life, it sucks. Sometimes man, it gets rough out there.
A real underdog story of a team that dumped millions of dollars in NIL. I'm sure just when Kentucky flirted with the idea of hiring Scott Drew, signed him to some contract that would be just unbelievably cost prohibitive to get him out of. Not that I'm saying they will anytime soon, but let's say these last 3 seasons end up being indicative of what Baylor has the next decade. No one there is going to be too happy about that, even with memories of the 21 Natty.
Correct.
A few more stats for this game. Don't have a ton to say. It's the second time seeing an opponent. We usually go a bit quicker on that. Worth a reminder that Baylor is one of the worst perimeter defensive teams in the country coming into the week. They're 300th nationally in opponent 3-point field goal percentage. They're a little more respectable in Big 12 play. They're only 11th out of 16 teams, just looking at conference games, but probably a bad matchup for how good the Cougs have mostly been shooting from deep this season. In the first matchup between these teams, the Cougs shot just under 42% from deep. Baylor is 15th nationally in offensive efficiency, but they get their shots blocked a lot and are outside the national top 100 in turnover percentage, which I think are two big things that the Cougars are going to do. We'll say you like to get me more away from the numbers and more to the narrative side of the game. And I think that is to your strength as my co-host to push me out of there. If you want to talk about motivation, I don't ever doubt that a Kelvin Sampson coach team is going to come into a game motivated, but I mean, let's just factually talk about this game stakes. U of H has already clinched the Big 12 1 seed regular season title and a 1 or the absolute worst, a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament field. Baylor's still a team that I would bet any sum of money will also be in that field, but a win here on senior night and in front of what I'm assuming will be a great crowd in Waco, that fully locks them into the tournament field. That fully removes any nerves that I think that fan base has about making the field or just skidding to the end of the season. And a nice win when it's been a while since they've gotten a really signature win in the season. But I also know that the guys in this team took it personally how much LJ Cryer got booed the last time these teams played at Foster Pavilion. I've also enjoyed a lot of things from this season, but if the Cougs can find a way to make sure LJ Cryer wins his last ever game at Baylor, that would be just fantastic.
That would be fantastic. I would love that. Yeah, I think it's gonna Foster Pavilion. This will be my first time going into Foster Pavilion. So it should be a fun Saturday night for me. And there's an alumni group meetup at a local bar, and I'm hanging out with my mom all day, and then my dad's going to the game, so I may be a few drinks in going in at Baylor. Could be a good time, folks. Could be a good time.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I cannot wait to hear the stories between when we record this and I was gonna say when we record next time. see which ones make the cut for her talking about on air. And as conference championships are always big news here, our next two topics tonight will be the two Big 12 championship events that have finished up since we last recorded, the swimming and diving championships in Federal Way, Washington, and the indoor track and field championships in Lubbock, hosted by Texas Tech. If you're still okay with this order, Bobby, I figure we would lead off talking about the Cougar sport of those two that we've talked about least recently, Cougar swimming and diving, who we previewed the championship of 2 episodes ago.
Let's do it.
So, as a team, the Cougars ultimately finished in 3rd place out of the 10 total women's swim and dive programs competing at the Big 12 championships. The Cougs were just 28.5 points back of Arizona in 2nd place. The two teams kind of traded 2nd and 3rd over different days of the events. Arizona State, the team that we highlighted as the pretty sizable favorites coming into the event, though maybe not the level of favorite that UT Austin was last year, ended up winning by 400 plus points over their in-state rivals, Arizona. And from the first day of the event results that I saw, it never looked like there was going to be anything other than an ASU win for the championship. I think my pre-event expectation, or at least my strong hope, was the Cougs would at least establish themselves in a second tier of teams, likely with Arizona, that separate themselves from the rest of the pack, which is exactly where U of H and Arizona's season performances would have pointed to them being, and glad to see you didn't notably underachieve that. If you want to compare last season's Big 12 championship performance to this one, the Cougs basically ended up with a comparable points haul to what they got last year, and adding to the context that this season you had 10 teams as opposed to last year's 8, and even with ASU's win, you didn't have a program hoovering up the points like the Longhorns. And so I think even though if you look at the top line, you went from 2nd to 3rd place, I would say it was a comparable performance. And ultimately, I think the Cougs acquitted themselves well up in the SeaTac area. What are your thoughts, Bobby?
Yeah, I think it was a really good performance. Like you said, top line, you see going from 2nd to 3rd, and you freak out a little bit, but then you realize that the people who finished ahead of you were the people who are new. You had 2 new teams, so if you look at who you competed against last year, you didn't take a step back. You, in fact, I would say you probably want to step forward over the teams that were in the conference championship with you last year. You stayed on top of the original, kind of Big 12 people who were teams that were still here. And now, where does this team go from here? You kind of hope next year you get a little closer to Arizona, and it truly feels like you're building something in a conference here. Outside of, I think you and I have had this discussion, outside of basketball, you could make the argument that this and track are probably our second best teams, and you can see a foundation being built here for this swim and dive group to be really good going forward and be one of those consistent teams that is winning some individual Big 12 events and then getting closer and closer to a team Big 12 title.
Yeah, consistency is so hard, and I think this program has done very well. We'll mention some standout performances here from one of the relays. Your 400 medley relay of Lottie Cole and Henrietta Fongley, Nourel Gendi, and Leah Gupil finished in 3rd place. Gupil won the B final of the 50 freestyle. She was 6th in the A final of the 200 freestyle. Flo Peter finished 2nd in the 200 breaststroke A finals. Michelle McLeod was 2nd in the platform dive finals after finishing 1st in the prelims. Fongley also finished 2nd in the 100 breaststroke and 4th in the 200. Lottie Cullen, I think, who I mentioned a bit ago as part of that 400 medley relay, put an exclamation point on what's been a really incredible freshman season. Finished 2nd in the 100 backstroke A final, had an NCAA B cut time. I think almost everything I've mentioned, except diving, which goes through a slightly different system, was an NCAA B cut time, which means the Cougars have a chance to in those events, these athletes keep their season going. But yeah, Collins was, like I said, second in the 100 backstroke final and also won the B final of the 200 backstroke, getting the Cougars valuable points in both. Elizabeth Jimenez also finished fourth in the 100 backstroke A final with a B cut time, and fourth in the 200 backstroke there as well. Let's see if there's any other ones. Oh yeah, gotta mention, really awesome team performance in the 200 butterfly A final.
Mm-hmm.
4 different Cougars finishing in the the higher points. Adelaide Muter and Sydney Nethercutt getting on the podium in second and third place. Obviously, they're both B cut times. And then Nurul Kendi and Abby Alvarez getting the Cougars a combined 47 points with the 6th and 7th place finishes. And sophomore Nora Hedier was just off winning the B final, gave the Cougars another 17 points there. I think that's most of the standard performances from this championship. A lot of them. I probably missed at least a few of them. Sydney Nethercutt in the distance events, she finished fourth in the 1650 freestyle.
Yeah, just a quick thing. One of the things that I had learned on the website is this is the 3 swimmers who are headed to the NCAA championships since is the most U of H has sent since 2020, where they would have sent 7 swimmers to the meet. And then Houston is one of 5 Big 12 schools to send swimmers to the NCAAs, and second most swimmers being represented in the Big 12, behind obviously number 14 Arizona State.
Obviously a lot bigger bummers in society than this, but I don't know if for that Cougar sports season, the 2019-21, like obviously I thought that was a good men's basketball team that was like rounding into form. And obviously the spring sports, like I hate those athletes didn't get most or hardly any of a season, but it was right decision to cancel it, to be clear. But like that 2020 swim and dive program not getting to send those athletes,
so good.
That was such a good team. Probably the best swimming group that UH has had, I think, in program history. And to have them not go to NCAA is like, again, many bigger things in the world, but that's one of the bigger heartbreakers.
No, for sure.
From covering this show. We'll end on a slightly happier note, though, because up next, the Cougars will be participating in NCAA diving zones. Then, like Bobby said, you'll be sending a few athletes to the NCAA championships, for sure. Actually being hosted, I noticed this, at the same venue in Federal Way, Washington, which
nice.
At the time, like I'm sure I saw some pictures of it when we were doing the preview a couple episodes ago, and I was just like, it looks nice, but like kind of random that they're going to a natatorium in Seattle. When you don't like, it's not like, oh well, Washington is randomly part of this. Like, no, like your closest program is Utah, and I can tell you from living in this part of the country, SLC to Seattle is not like a 2-hour drive. Like that's a 2.5 hour flight.
Yep.
But like I think it's cool that actually I don't know. Again, it's a pool's a pool, a diving board's a diving board, but like it can't hurt to have been for your athletes actually have competed in this place prior. Like athletes are creatures of habit. I think so. That's kind of a cool thing if the Big 12 did that with the championships in mind.
Yeah.
And we also had the Big 12 Indoor Track and Field Championships hosted by Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas. My favorite parts of these championships, the track and field one specifically, is seeing athletes that we've been following week in, week out kind of excel. Like, okay, like we've seen this person, they had the personal best these 3 weeks. So you see them really round into form. But I also really like the surprise performances. Athletes that are maybe making a late season appearance, like we got from program legend Shaun Maswanganyi, who was a surprise ad at the last minute. Athletes who also maybe weren't the highest ones on our radar, having their best performances of the season at the conference championship event. The team results, the Cougar men finished 5th place with 72 points. There were 13 total men's teams competing. The women finished in 14th place out of the 16 total competing. On the women's side, they had 20 points. Neither of those results is really surprising. I expected the men to have more athletes competing for serious points and end up with a bigger haul, but I would also say most of the standout women's athletes that we kind of expected to perform well here did deliver in the championship. If you want to do a year-on-year comparison, even acknowledging that there's a different makeup of teams in the Big 12 now as compared to where it was last year. In 2024 at this event, the Cougar men finished in 6th place with fewer points, 55. The women did finish better, 11th place with 33 points, but I think the context there is that the women graduated a number of difference-making athletes, including but not limited to Kellyanne Beckford, who is one of your better athletes, men, women, all sports last season. So I would say if I had to give very general descriptions of each team's performance, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong here, the men did well and I would say slightly exceeded expectations, and the women basically met expectations but didn't really underachieve them in any specific way. Bobby, what are your thoughts about Big 12 indoors?
Yeah, I think I think your thoughts sum it up pretty well. Men did a little bit better than expected. Women did probably on pace with what we think, or what we kind of thought. One of the things that actually got me kind of excited, was the all freshman 4x400 of Demarion Jacobs, Sanders the second, Hernandez, and Reed posted that 307, which doesn't seem like much. It's eighth place in the relay.
That's a
Doesn't
point.
seem like much, but yeah, it's a point. Not only is it a point, which is also great, but to have all freshmen finish eighth, and then it's the sixth fastest time in program history. That just says a lot about what could happen in the future and the where we could end up with this program.
Yeah, quick summary of the performances. It go kind of like we did for swimming and diving, if
Let's
you
do
don't
it.
mind, Bobby.
Go, buddy.
So you had 4 event winners total on the men's and women's side. Your women's winner was Kiela Dove in the women's shot put. Not surprising. You had literally the top performance in the country. She dominated that like you'd expect. The 3 men's event winners were Grant Levesque, who repeated in the heptathlon. Excuse me, I don't know why I had a hard time saying heptathlon there. John Adesola in the 60-meter dash, which was not surprising that he was a point skater there, but I think surprising he was an event winner, which falls in that category of athletes outperforming what you might have expected. And then Andrea Mita, not surprisingly, won the men's high jump as well. We'll acknowledge also a mistake on my part in our preview of Big 12 indoors. I know, me making a mistake, how rare.
Ooh.
I said Dove would not be competing at Big 12 indoors because I mistakenly read that she would be participating at the 2025 USA Track and Field Indoor Championships in New York. I was wrong. That event was actually 2 weekends ago. Dove placed 4th there and then competed last weekend with the Cougars in Lubbock at Big 12 indoors. A few other standout performances that were not event winners, but were still obviously very important and notable. Jamar Marshall Jr., who we mentioned in the preview, I believe you did, Bobby, was 3rd in the men's 60 hurdles. Adam Mason, kind of standout middle distance guy for you for the last few years, is 2nd in the men's 600 yards. Shaun Maswanganyi, who I mentioned in the start, surprise edition, finished 5th in the men's 60-meter dash. Casey McCoy, one of the women's athletes that I expected to be a point skater based just on her season performances. She was 4th in the finals of the women's 60 hurdles. And in that category with Adesola of surprising positive performances, Caleb Marlborough was 4th in the men's triple jump. Invita Marina, 4th place in the women's 60 yards, set the program record. Always got to mention when Cougar athlete sets program record. And an athlete I've mentioned a few times here got points with Mita in the men's high jump. Teray Stoudemire got you some points on the board there as well.
Just awesome performances all around by the Cougs.
Yeah. So up next are the NCAA Indoor Championships. Unlike outdoor track and field season, where you have a West and East prelim, you don't have that here. It's just straight from the conference championship meets to the NCAA championship meet, though obviously at this meet there are prelim events before the finals and were applicable. For each event, the top 16 individual performers from the season are selected for relays. The top 12 performing relays are selected to participate. And next week, we will discuss all the Cougar athletes who will be competing indoors at the championship in Virginia Beach.
Absolutely.
So it's been a while since we talked Cougar women's basketball. I think the last time we did, correct me if I'm wrong here, was right after the win over Oklahoma State. Kind of by design. Right. Yeah, kind of by design. Cougs haven't won since then, including an opening round loss earlier today by a 65-58 final to the Big 12 tournament 9 seed Colorado, opening round of the Big 12 Women's Championship in Kansas City, ending the season with a 5-24 overall record. We've been running long recently. We've had a lot of sports to talk about, and it seemed to the two of us almost unspoken that adding 6 to 7 minutes of us kind of glumly talking about how bad this team has been this year would be kind of just piling on the misery. And
yeah,
much as we've been wrong in previous instances where the Cougars should have made a coaching change and didn't for reasons known only to Chris Pesman, women's basketball head coach Ronald Huey does not have a contract after the season. I would expect very shortly. The game went final earlier this afternoon that U of H is going to release a statement where they talk about a mutual parting of ways, not unlike what happened with the former tennis head coach Helena Bezovic last spring. Bobby, before we go any further about what happens next, what do you got to add about this current season, man?
I mean, I was
You were at the TCU. You drove through significant rush hour traffic to see this team be a sacrificial lamb to TCU, unfortunately.
correct. And it was ugly, man. It's when Coach Huey first started, my whole thing was I can't. When he first started, I went to a game and I remember texting you like,
I think it was at SMU, right?
yeah, I feel like it was at SMU, and I remember texting you like, this guy, he doesn't have the horses. I can see what he wants to do, but he doesn't have the players to do what he wants to do. And I remember texting you and just being like, man, this team is going to be good. Once he gets his players in here, this team is going to be good at basketball. I can see what he's trying to accomplish. I can see what he wants to do, and it's going to go well. And then, buddy, it just hasn't. You go and you see a team like TCU play against this U of H team, and you realize just how far behind it is. It's one thing to kind of see it when you're looking at score updates, when you get the score updates on your phone for women's basketball, and you're like, oh, look, we lost by 20, man, we're far off. There's something different about watching it in person. It's not close. It's not good. There were players who literally, I think I texted you. We had players who we weren't making contact on screens. Like we couldn't get and then there's no wonder that the players are not getting open. There's no contact on a screen. They just run around your post player. It's like you see the player for TCU, Sedona Prince, one of the better players in college basketball, women's college basketball. She's really good. And you see her 10 steps down the court ahead of your big, and she's getting out on it wasn't necessarily a fast break, but she's out running, and your post is just kind of at half court by the time she catches the ball and lays it in. It's kind of like, well, what do we do here? So it was tough. It was really tough to watch.
I hate this is how Layla Blair's U of H career ends, because she genuinely has been one of the better players to come through this program and stuck with you. Like, talk about in this era, it's not just a football, men's basketball thing. Like, athletes have never transferred more. And she stuck with you as a whole local kid. She stuck with this program, and I hate that this is the end for her career. I hate that's the end for Huey. I'll say my longer thoughts for when U of H makes the fish. Yeah, you could say it's if, because it has, I haven't been told conclusively by anyone with the knowledge. Anyone who would know, like, would tell us, hey, like, we hear, like, believe it or not,
yeah,
we do sometimes get a scoop from someone who I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this person knows that something's going to happen, and it proves true. Have not been told that yet. I still feel confident probably to say it's a win here. There's a new head coach, and I think be good for both parties when it happens. It really, really would be for him. I don't think anyone was done any favors by Coach Huey getting brought back this season. Like the congratulations. Like, we saved low six figures and just put everyone involved in this program through the most miserable Sisyphean, use my little fancy private school education. But a real, like, if you know the tale of Sisyphus, this was definitely a season of Coach Huey pushing a boulder up a hill and then just getting crushed repeatedly by it in the form of Big 12 play. And that sucks. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure
I've always said there's one person I want to succeed. It's all of our coaches, Huey is up there. It's very hard for me to say anything like this because there's nobody who has enjoyed being a Houston Cougar coach. We always talk about in football, like find that coach who wants to be here. I haven't seen a coach that wants to be a Houston Cougar and has embodied what it is to be a Houston Cougar more than Coach Huey. He just hasn't won, and at some point, your personality can't cover for losses.
Yeah. We'll have the longer discussion, I think, of what U of H needs to do from here once U of H makes any kind of change official. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with this basketball season. It's not a happy place, unfortunately.
Yep.
Get a little bit happier by going to Cougar baseball. Wasn't a week that made me block off early June for an NCAA baseball trip, Bobby, but I still thought there was a good amount to be encouraged about from the week that was. Not an outstanding week, but a week that didn't make you go back to, well, I think this team's going to be a week that confirmed some of the positive things, and I think also confirmed some of the things that this team still needs to work on. You got the week off to a nice start. Right after we recorded our last podcast, the Cougars went final in a 4-3 win over Sam Houston State in the Don Sanders Cup. You trailed for most of the game, but after we finished recording, saw the go-ahead home run, or go-ahead runs in the 8th, courtesy of a 2 RBI double by Karsten Sabathia. A really nice pitching performance as well. Kendall Hoffman, a freshman, had 2 scoreless appearances in prior games and gave you 3 solid innings. So started this one, Richie Roman got the save, but got to mention Malik Lott. I'm still in Malik Wilson mode. Malachi Lott, who played last season at Sam Houston after previously playing for U of H, got the win with 2 scoreless innings on the mound. Also hit his first home run of the season. Cougar pitching staff had 12 strikeouts to 1 walk, which is nice to see. So midweek baseball is notoriously volatile, but it was good to start. We saw that with last night's game against UTRGV, but it was nice to start the week with a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, though, the majority of our thoughts will be about the UT Arlington weekend series, though. Bobby was out there in person for some of it. So tell me, buddy, how was the in-person experience at Clay Gould Park? The fun moments, big little picture thoughts. And if you want to, your hitter and pitcher of the weekend as well.
Yeah, so I will actually start with just some thoughts.
Whatever order you want to do, yeah.
That stadium is tiny. They have a massive screen. Not as big as like U of H's, but for the size of the stadium, it's a very big screen. You're in the middle of almost like a neighborhood almost. You're on the edges of a neighborhood. You're actually not on campus. Like you might technically be on campus, but it would be like for U of H fans listening, if U of H baseball field was more at like the other side of 45. Like, okay, maybe, is what it felt like. I didn't feel like I was on UTA's campus like I have when I've gone to other things there. You might technically be on their campus, but it doesn't feel like it. You actually like right up along an elementary school, which is kind of funny. And you're right next to their softball stadium as well as their soccer fields. Anyways, that was kind of an aside, but overall, good experience out there. Games weren't too expensive. It's a GA, so there's no assigned seating or anything like that. It was hot, man. It was only like 80 degrees, but the sun was like out on Saturday. I think in terms of how the Cougars looked, just kind of talking about that, I actually joked with listener Shaun, who was out at the game. Shout out, Shaun.
Friend of the program, Shaun. We'll give Shaun better than promotion over listener.
Yeah. Friend of the program, Shaun. He was. We were at the game, and before the game there was that alumni meetup, and it was me, him, a very nice Cougar alum named Jerry. We were talking, and I said, guys, they were like, oh, you were at the game last night. What'd you think? And I said, guys, I'm convinced that UTA's mound isn't 60 feet 6 inches. It's like 61 feet and like 3 inches. Because I've never seen a pitching staff, ours and theirs, spike more balls in the dirt than what I saw Friday night. It was incredible. And then, not to provide spoilers, we saw it a lot on Saturday. We saw it some on Monday as well, or yesterday as well, Tuesday. So it's I think you'd like to see the bats be a little bit better. Outside of that Sunday game, right? It's hard to say you want them to be that much better when you put up 21 in a game, but the big takeaway from this week for me, having gone to 3 Cougar baseball games, was really the bullpen and just how ineffective it was. It seems like we're getting some pretty good performances out of our starters. I mean, Friday, sure, your starter gets pulled early on. He gives up 3 early Friday night, but then you bring in your long reliever, a guy who you could make the argument could be a starter, a weekend starter on the rotation, and he comes in and looks really good. So your shorter guys who you need to have 1 or 2 innings, it just doesn't seem to be there right now.
I mean, I know Richie Roman kind of blew up against, but like he'd been pretty good until then. Antoine John's been pretty good.
Yeah, but it's the stopgap. Jean gets you 5 because your starter doesn't do great. Who gets you from 6 to 9 to get to Richie Roman? It's kind of, you're gonna have to find those kind of guys to get you a little bit better. Just kind of overall is how do we get from the 6th to the 9th inning? I think is going to be a place where the Cougars are going to need to see improvement this year.
Yeah, I think he's still figuring it out, but also I would say Jean and Roman are on the higher, on the higher end of recent bullpen guys I've been excited about.
Yes. I think those 2, like I said, are really good. I think
more than 2.
It's going to be finding a few guys who can come in and actually hit a stopgap. In terms of my hitter of the week, this one was kind of difficult for me, and I'll tell you why, Sam. It was kind of difficult for me because there were a lot of good defensive plays, and the guys who were making the defensive plays didn't exactly pop on the hitting chart or the hitting scorebook, if that makes sense, stats wise. But for the weekend, I would feel bad if I didn't call out Malachi Lott. Even though he's not my player of the game, he had 2 absolutely massive assists on Friday. Even though you lose that game, he guns a guy out from left field into at the plate. And then the very next, was it the next inning? It may have been a couple of innings later. They run on him again inexplicably, and he guns the runner at third. Just absolute darts. Guns the runner at third, throws him out. They don't really run much on him the rest of the night, and don't really, when he's out in left field, really run on him too much from there the rest of the weekend. So hard not to shout him out, but he's not my player of the weekend, my hitter of the weekend.
Building suspense, I love it.
That's going to be Riley Jackson, who was just an absolute brick wall behind the plate. I mentioned how many guys were throwing the balls in the dirt, and he just was stonewalling him. I loved it. It was really, really nice to see that from him. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of hitter for the weekend. In terms of pitcher, a little bit harder, right? You didn't have a great weekend pitching wise, right? You give up 8 where you score 21. The next game you give up 6. And then you give up, what was it, 7 or 8 on Friday night, I want to say. So
7, yeah, you're right.
Kind of hard to find the guy that you want to give the shout out to there, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But I think my pitcher of the weekend is going to be Antoine Jean. I thought he was really good all weekend. He pitched really well last night versus UTRGV as well. So kind of coming in relief there.
For my big picture thoughts, for what you haven't already covered, in a perfect world, I think you sweep the series, but you also hit an insane amount of double plays on Friday. You weren't as far off. Insane. It was like 4.
5.
Weren't as far off as you would think. And so at this point in the season, I'm actually reasonably happy where the offense is, especially because we knew going into the year it was going to be almost an entirely different lineup than 2024. Some guys take a while to get warmed up, and even with all that, there haven't been too many games where you could look at and the offensive output was terrible, where it was just like, you couldn't buy a hit today. We're also continuing to see guys that we expected in the preseason to be big contributors, guys like Connor McGinnis and Aaron Lugo are doing awesome on the plate. Tyler Cox and Trey Broussard are starting to get there. I think before the year's done, Cade Clemmy will get there as well. There are some areas of the pitching staff that I'm bullish on. Talked about it earlier. Richie Roman and Antoine Jean look like a really strong 1-2 in relief. And there are other guys, I agree with you, that no one has necessarily truly made their case to be among that higher tier of reliever. But guys like Kendall Hoffman, Malachi Lott, and Chris Perez, who I think have looked promising in limited action. Not sold in the starting rotation yet. That's sort of my big concern. Ryan Dollar hasn't been able to make it out of the first and 2 of his 3 starts. Did a little better against UTRGV on Tuesday, but I mean, still didn't get to the 4th.
Yeah, and I want to say he gave up a run pretty early last night as well.
That's why, yeah. So I mean, he was not terrible, but it wasn't like, oh, okay, like this guy is showing that 2 of these 3 starts are a fluke. He kind of looks like what we expected, which was Ryan Dollar, like a toolsy, but like not super consistent pitcher. A guy we were surprised to see in the weekend rotation. Grayson Dresnick's only been a little better. I think a deep bullpen can make up for an iffy rotation, but I don't know 100% if you have a deep enough bullpen to make up for that yet. I do like what we've seen from Paul Schmitz in the weekend. Not to totally tip my hand of who I have. Even his bad start against Cal, he showed a very high floor, and that's maybe the most important thing for me. Knowing that your weekend starter kind of guys, even on a day where he doesn't have it, at least he's going to be able to eat some innings, which I think Paul Schmitz did in that loss to Cal, and I did better than that this weekend. And also, health historically has been an issue for the guy, so it's nice to see him averaging over 5 innings per start early in the season this year. My hitter of the weekend, like you said, a lot of right answers to this question. I went with Carson Sabathia. Number of guys had really good hitting weekends, as you would expect from a series where he scored 33 runs in the final 2 games. But for consistency of production, I couldn't go with anyone but Sabathia. For the entire weekend, he was 7 of 13 at the plate, had multiple RBIs in every game in Arlington, was a big part of the Cougs putting up early crooked numbers in all 3 of these games. So it wasn't just that he got hits. He was getting those hits at key points of every game. One series does not a season make, but Sabathia really has started to entrench himself in this lineup with what we've seen from him for the past week or 2. And he wasn't someone that you or I were certain would become a regular guy. He was a name to watch, but and I know not every weekend's going to be this good for the guy, but I'm excited to see him potentially be another part of this promising lineup. Honorable mention also to Kenneth Jimenez. Unreal Sunday stat line here, if you didn't see, Bobby.
I did.
4 for 4, 5 runs scored, 2 RBIs, and for good measure, drew a walk.
Yeah, that'll work. That'll work, bud. That'll work.
So for my pitcher of the weekend, had to think about it a bit more. You probably guess who I went with. I went with Paul Schmitz for his Saturday start. Not just that he gave you 5 innings and only allowed 1 earned run, but it's the larger context. You came into Saturday down 0-1 in the series, coming off a Friday night start where Ryan Dollar couldn't get out of the first inning, and Schmitz's performance allowed you not to be in a nightmare spot with your bullpen. And I think that was hugely important to you eventually being able to not get a great pitching weekend, but enough pitching on Sunday to see out the series win. So Schmitz was my pick here. My honorable mention was your pick, though, Antoine Jean, for his 4 innings of 1-run ball and 7 strikeouts and really fun Friday night. So not dramatically changing my season outlook based on this weekend, but It was a take care of business weekend up in Arlington.
Yeah, don't love losing to UTRGV last night. But I think I texted you this. Or I may have texted you and Dustin. It may have just been you. Last night, having been at the game, it's hard to not freak out when you lose to UTRGV. But what I will say is, baseball is a sport that sometimes that's just what baseball do, right? Giving up 6th in the 9th, you don't really expect that. Big thing there was they were hitting the ball hard, right? But there were a couple of really good shots that the Cougs had last night that just kind of found outfielders' gloves or found a fielder more so than UTRGV did. So just kind of one of those things. UTRGV had, you could see the momentum building. You could hear it in their dugout in that 9th inning that they were. It just kind of gets going, and sometimes it doesn't stop in baseball. So nothing really to freak out too much about with that. That's one of those ones that if you're on the bubble, you kind of go, oh crap. But if you take care of business and, it happens. And
it's been big baseball, like you said.
The old selection committee, I don't think they weigh midweek games too much. I mean, A&M lost yesterday. Like there's there's a lot of weird things that happen on Tuesday, Wednesday nights in across the country.
But if U of H beats a big name opponent, Bobby, that's actually reflective of U
Oh
of
yeah,
H's
no,
skill. I wanna be clear
that means
about
we're
that.
winning the title.
That's my card. No, I mean if someone is freaking out about a mid-season or midweek regular season baseball result, like that's just somebody who, I'm sorry, not to be condescending, doesn't know college baseball. It happens. You don't like to lose a game where you had a 9th inning lead. You don't like to see your closer get lit up like that. And I kind of started to question it at the time, but you talked some sense into me. I'll give you credit, buddy, because if there's a big regular or big weekend regular season series happening Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then yeah, man, like, sorry, like, don't bring Richie Roman out here. Opposite of that, you have your weakest weekend series of the year coming up. UTRGV and Rice are actually your big games this week. That's the one you need. These are what you need to break out Richie Roman for. Hadn't pitched since Saturday. It's always extremely easy to question a pitching change decision when it didn't go well, but I agree with you. It's a very defensible one.
Yeah.
And also weird to say because the Niners went poorly, but the big inning is more prone to happen in midweek baseball. Your pitching looked really salty for the first 8 innings. Like UTRGV has been a good hitting team to start this season, and you had 2 walks and 12 strikeouts. Like this, you're still figuring out who's who in terms of which pitchers you can rely on. You're throwing more guys now than I think you will be in late April, early May. But 2 strikeouts and 12. Like this staff can miss bats, and this staff is walking at least slightly lower clip. Now, we'll see. Like when you get the tougher competition, will the staff be as good? TBD. But they're doing a good job missing bats here early.
This UTRGV team could, not that I'm somebody who knows the Southland Conference like the back of my hand, but right? Isn't that what they play in? They play in the Southland.
They do, yes. If I would have been like, oh, I think it's the WAC if I had not been on their baseball page this morning doing my prep, even though none of it I used besides this.
I mean, it's a midweek game, so take it for what it is. But they got a win versus DBU in Arlington. They're gonna have a chance in a week to play Southern Miss. They got some good teams on their schedule. They're going to be at TCU, at Rice. I mean, you got a chance they play at Texas. You got a chance to really kind of see how you were or how you stack up against them. They very well could be an NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, no, I think I think that's not one we're going to be like thinking about literally after this episode. It's just midweek baseball. Would have liked to have won it, but not a big deal that you didn't.
Yep.
Real quick, because doing the classic in-game update for a game that's going to have gone final by the episode, but I certainly hope that U of H doesn't find a way to lose a game. Have you seen the score on it?
Last I saw it was 7-0.
9-0 with the bases loaded, and Xavier
perfect.
Perez about to come up here. So
did you see
baseball? But hope we do find a way to close this one out. If
did you see the exciting thing that happened in the game though?
No, because I literally opened uofhstats.com like while you were, I think, talking about the UTA series.
I saw it on Twitter. Trey Broussard inside the park home run.
Oh, hell yeah.
So that's just kind of cool.
That's awesome. I appreciate you doing that. Make sure to give this game a little more color when we come back here last time. So as alluded to, the Cougars will return home. Okay, you're already in Houston, but you make the long trek from South Main back to campus. We'll host the Grambling Tigers, the defending SWAC champions. Don't think this needs a big preview. Grambling is by far the worst team U of H has seen this season to date, and probably will for the entirety of the season. And again, for what we've seen in flashes from the Cougar lineup, an opponent who came into the week with a 12-plus team ERA, who's mostly only faced other HBCUs this season, should be easy feasting.
Yeah, you would hope so.
Really try not to be disrespectful to this opponent.
Yep.
Again, a team that went to last year's NCAA tournament, a team that won their conference. Like, those are Division I athletes. I am not. But they're coming off getting swept at home by TSU. This should be 3 Cougar wins at Trader Park, and frankly, 3 wins where we kind of see your bench guys, you see guys who have pitched a little this year, but maybe haven't earned the high leverage spots. This is a find out who could do what in a Division I game kind of weekend, and hopefully 3 easy wins.
Absolutely.
And last but not least, this week we have a Cougar spring sport that has just started Big 12 play. That's the Cougar tennis team, which we are going to talk about here in Cougar Tennis Corner. Not the easiest week for the Cougs. Won't sugarcoat the bigger picture takeaways for Cougar tennis, but also a situation in one of the two matches played where I think the final score doesn't tell the whole story about how competitive the Cougs were and potential for wins that just, unfortunately, time didn't allow for. But factually, two matches, two losses, and the Cougs weren't able to get a team point. And I'm positive every player and coach wants to see the team do better, even acknowledging the difficulty of your opening game against Oklahoma State this past Friday night in Stillwater. Went about how you would expect. The Cowgirls are consistently one of the very best teams in the country. Still true this season. Team that was predicted to win the Big 12 in the preseason has singles and doubles lineups just flooded with players who are in the top 100, if not top 50. We'll say, not that we've decided the doubles point because OSU won on courts 2 and 3 by pretty comfortable margins. But on court 1, you did have Santa Strombaha and Lisa Morisova up 5-3, one game away from taking that court. But ultimately, the Cowgirls did clinch the wins on the other two courts before that one went final. In the singles portion, both Strombaha on court 1 and Sophie Skoten on court 6 were fairly competitive in matches that ultimately went unfinished. Santa was down 5-4 still in the first set when the match was called, and Sophie had just lost the first set on a tiebreaker, was tied 1-1 in her second set. So if you want to kind of squint to find the positives here, I'm going to be doing some squinting. OSU is incredibly good year in, year out in women's college tennis. There was no realistic scenario where U of H was going to win this match. And frankly, I could have told you that before the season, before I knew anything about this season's roster, before I became even more optimistic. Just that's where you are right now. I'm not being negative. Kat said it after the match, and she can, I think, speak pretty expertly in the subject as an OSU program alumna, as a college tennis head coach. OSU's roster right now costs more than most programs' entire budget. If you believe U of H should be competing with OSU right now in the sport, go foot 6 figures worth of NIL money to make it happen. Believe me, if I won the lottery, that's what I'd be doing. Right now, you're just not on the same level as the team, and that's fine. But I think disappointment for the K-State match on Sunday afternoon, disappointment wouldn't be the right word. If there was any match I would have liked to see the Cougars compete a little bit more in, at least when it came to getting points to the board, it was this one against K-State. Kind of like the UTSA match that closed non-conference play before. This is one where you playing poorly in the doubles portion really doomed you here. Lost pretty uncompetitively on courts 2 and 3 in doubles, and while the court 1 match with Strombaha and Morisova was competitive, it's also kind of immaterial if the other two matches finished comfortably in K-State's favor. But I don't think you have to squint as hard to find the positive things from at least the singles part of this match, or at least compared to the OSU match, you don't have to squint as hard at the positives. Looking at the 3 matches that went unfinished, Strombaha won her first set on court 1 on a tiebreaker, was only trailing 3-2 in the second set when the match was called. Morisova on court 3 and Krohotina on court 4 had one of the first sets of their matches and were within one game of their opponents in the second set as well. Those were both very winnable. Not a stretch to say the Cougs could have won all 3 of those if the matches just get played out to the end, and maybe you're looking at a 4-2 or 4-3 loss a bit differently than what is admittedly the top line result here, which is a second straight 4-0 loss to open Big 12 play. Doesn't change the fundamental fact that K-State was a better team and the deserving winner on Sunday, but this team is competing and deserved more than the top line result they got. Happens in sports. Loss is a loss, and I think the team still would think they should have done better in the situation, but I still think you can look at that, at least the second match, pretty clearly and see, okay, like this is where they should have done better, but this is also where the Cougs played better than previous iterations.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my big takeaway from watching a lot of these tennis matches and following the results and whatnot. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was sitting on the computer watching all the matches one by one, but just kind of looking at the results and kind of looking at some of the stats and whatnot. You really just see more that this team is already, even though the results aren't saying it, they're competing better than you saw last year from the group that was here last year. You're getting some close matches. So it just has a different feel and vibe around it so far in Big 12 play. Results are the same.
Yeah.
Results are the same, which isn't great, but the vibes are different, and you know me and my vibes, man.
The horrible irony is doubles. Doubles are the big struggle point for you right now. And Kat's is one of the better doubles players to play the sport in the last like 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
I think that'll get fixed, but that's probably got to be the most painful part.
Yep, absolutely.
And unfortunately, the short-term schedule remains difficult. Number 40 TCU is coming to town on Friday afternoon. The Cougs will also host number 15 Baylor on Sunday. We'll take a quick look at the Horned Frogs first. They opened Big 12 play 2-0, but those 2 wins were over West Virginia and Cincy teams that I am reasonably confident the Cougars will still finish ahead of when it's all said and done this year. They did have a strong non-conference win over Wazoo in late February. They beat common opponent Rice and Houston. No slouches themselves. Despite both teams competing at the ITA Texas Regional Championships, Bobby, you were actually at the only fall head-to-head between Houston and TCU athletes. It was that ITA Texas match with Santa and Tommy Maine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a little Word doc I created that just pulled it from all the various fall result things so I could see, okay, like which Cougar athletes competed against these. Just got like fall tennis is fall tennis. Like you take it with kind of a grain of salt, but it is fun to see, like, okay, like, oh, so-and-so competed in so-and-so. And literally the only one, despite these being 2 Texas programs that competed in common events, was that classic Strumbaja win over Tommy Maine. Rematch probably not going to happen there. Maine's mostly playing courts 4 and 5. Strumbaja plays in court 1. I would guess Strumbaja's most likely court 1 matchup will be Jade Otway. Otway is part of the Horned Frogs top doubles pairing with Isabel Pascual. Those 2 are the current number 23 ranked doubles pairing in Division 1. This match will also be the first time the Cougs get to host one of the better Big 12 teams. Really, the first time you're hosting a better team of any stripe this season. Like you've played Rice, SMU, K-State, and Oklahoma State, who are all varying degrees in the top 75, but played all of them away from home. This is your first time, all respect to Tarleton, UTA, and UNT, first time playing a high-level opponent, both of these at home. But no exaggeration, Horned Frogs will be very challenging, and Baylor on Sunday even more so. The Bears are 11-1 this spring, and some really good wins in that 11-1. San Diego, Denver, BYU, Wazoo, and Illinois in non-conference play. Like TCU, Baylor is 2-0 in Big 12 play. Didn't get a challenging path there. They also beat West Virginia and Cincy last weekend. But I think, make no mistake, this is a team that will contend for the league title, likely make a deep run in the NCAA postseason. The Cougs did see a lot of different Baylor athletes in fall competition and had a combined 5-4 record in those fall singles and doubles matches. You're feeling pretty good about that. We'll say most of those wins came against Baylor athletes who haven't played as much this spring. Athletes who I'm not super confident will be competing in Houston on Sunday. Didn't do as well against the athletes who have mostly played in Baylor's top 6, the players who go to most of these spring events. Not expecting wins here. Just want to see the team compete and maybe see some of the athletes who have been struggling lately surprise, do better than they've done in recent matches. Just you're gonna be probably 0-4 in Big 12 play after this, and that's fine. Like you knew it'd be a tough start to Big 12 play. You knew the only one of the first 4 matches that was going to be even close to one of those K-State, and just use this as a learning experience and be better for the more winnable games coming down the road in conference play.
Yep, it should be an exciting week for Cougar tennis here.
All right, Bobby, do we have a Cougar Golf Corner, or are we gonna save it for next week?
No, we do. We'll go over some men's results. Let's head on over to the corner. Well, welcome to the corner. Hope you enjoyed our trek through Augusta, Georgia here. But just real quick, we're going to talk about something that didn't go well for Cougar men's golf. Houston traveled to Cabo San Lucas. Really tough assignment there for the team having to go to Cabo for a tournament. Sam, just real quick, who do you think hosts the Cabo Collegiate? What college do you think is the host team for that.
Oh man, I should have put the team list in front of me. I know, because it's weird. I know, like, I've seen this like Arizona events where it's just like, okay, it's at some club in Tucson or Phoenix, and it's just like the host is Marquette. I'm using this example. I'm like, what? So who is it? Just tell me.
Arkansas. When you think of Cabo, think of.
So I think of I think of what people colloquially, a term that I'm not going to use and almost use. People of a southern variety think of as a real fancy vacation.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the Cougars finished DFL in this tournament. If you don't know what DFL is, that means dead effing last.
Dead fudging last.
I will tell you, this was a very stacked event. You have number 3, Arizona State, number 6, Oklahoma State. You have number 14, number 17, number 19. Everyone I've mentioned outside of number 14 is a Big 12 school, just by the way. And you also have number 1 Ole Miss, who finished second to last. They finished 13th out of 14th. The Cougs finished 14th. The problem I have is you weren't even particularly competitive. You finished 7 shots back of anyone else. Terrible first round. Shot 20 over, which was the worst by 5 strokes. Rounds 2 and 3 were a little bit better. You were kind of mid-pack there. You would have hoped to have seen a much better performance out of the Cougars than the one you got here. You don't expect to necessarily win this event, but finishing last is very discouraging. What I will say is you can tell how much this one hurt. The Cougs dropped 10 ranking places from just this event in and of itself. So you went from a top 50 program to now number 60, which is never a fun thing to have happen to you. So that's pretty much it for the men's team. They have a couple of weeks until they hit their next tournament. But the women start in about, I want to say this weekend. They play in an event called the Riverbend Intercollegiate, hosted at Riverbend Country Club in beautiful Sugar Land, Texas, with your host, Houston's Blessed University, HBU.
Thank you. They're not HCU. I keep hearing people call it, and I think it's a mistake. They're HBU.
Yeah. My friend who I'm staying with went to HBU, and he calls it Houston's Blessed University, and so I don't know if he's here right now.
He got us tickets for the HBU club level, Dustin and I, in 2015 to see them play Northern Colorado. By HBU club level, I mean the seats that had chairbacks. I also saw former Texans owner Bob McNair. Sorry.
Yeah, who I think is an HBU alum.
Oh, the stadium was / is named after. I don't know if he's an alum, but he's definitely a big donor.
But anyways, this is a tournament that you would expect the Cougs to show up and show out in. You have New Mexico State is probably the best school here. There's not many rankings on it where that we're seeing at this point, since it is just the participants. But U of H is probably the biggest name here. One name just to kind of shout out that I haven't seen in a very long time. McLennan Community College out of Waco, Texas, will be participating in this event as well. So just kind of cool to kind of see them competing with U of H. So yeah, you hope the Cougs win that tournament, maybe finish in second, right? Somebody goes off, does that kind of stuff. But should be an interesting week for Lady Cougar Golf, and hopefully the men's team can bounce back in their next tournament, which we will definitely talk about on future pods.
Bobby, I think we talked 9 sports and still successfully kept it just under 90 minutes, which a crazy thing to say about a 90-minute podcast. But I think this was
one of our better arts of work.
We did that. Not to pat ourselves in the back too much, but why don't you take us home, friend?
Well, everybody, that is it for this episode. As Sam alluded to, we just want to thank you guys for all of your support. And if you have some feedback for us, you can find us on Twitter at SH Podcast. You can also find us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. And if you have written off all social media, good for you. Pat yourself on the back. We will take your email at shpodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate that as well. And Sam spoke about this early on, but if you like what we do, you want to support the work Sam and I do on a week-to-week basis, we film podcasts even when we're on vacation. You can find us on Patreon, SH Podcast it's SH Podcast on
Patreon.com.
On Patreon. Patreon.com/SH Podcast. You can find us on there as well. As little as $5 a month will get you premium content. We will also not stop you from giving more than $5. But if that's something you want to support and you want to thank us for our work, we highly appreciate it. So Sam, what do we always say, buddy?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!